Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. My name is Mimi Geerges. I host the Mimi Geerges Show. It airs on XM satellite radio, now Sirius XM. We've been on the air for about 6 years now. I'm also an alumna of GW's Elliott School, so I'm really glad to be back here. This program is being audio taped for air on our program on XM radio. It's also being videotaped for air on local television. How things will go tonight, President Trachtenberg and I will chat for a while, and then we'll open it up for audience questions. There are also books in the back. Be sure to pick up your copy. President Trachtenberg has agreed to stay afterwards to sign all your books and to personalize them for you. Joel Trachtenberg certainly doesn't need an introduction, especially around here. He recently stepped down as president of George Washington University. He held that position for 19 years. And before that, he was at the University of Hartford as president for 11 years. And before that, vice president and dean of arts and sciences at Boston College for 8 years.
University.
He was educated at Columbia, Yale, and Harvard. And the book is Big Man on Campus. It's his memoir. He's got a lot of nuggets of wisdom on leadership and on higher education in America. It's his 6th book. Thank you so much for coming out and being with me today.
It's a pleasure. It just occurred to me as you were saying how long your show's been on the air that you must have started as a teenager.
Absolutely. I'm a child prodigy. Now, how did you come to the decision to step down from the presidency of GW?
I noticed that between the University of Hartford and GW, I had served as a president for 30 years. Since the average tenure in the country is 6 or 7, I had a feeling I had had my share, and I was keen to depart while I was a winner and unindicted.
Now, you said you also wanted to enjoy the restoration of your First Amendment rights. What does that mean?
Well, as you know, the First Amendment, among other things, entitles us to speak our minds freely in this country about issues controversial or uncontroversial, as it may suit us. As a university president, you are a spokesman to some extent, a representative of your organization, and obliged, therefore, to temper your remarks, lest people feel that you are saying things on behalf of George Washington University, which the institution may or may not feel.
Well, one of the things that you put in your book is a list of rules that you present for a university president or really anybody in a leadership position. One is you shouldn't make everybody mad at you at the same time.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Well, during the course of your work, you're going to make a lot of decisions, and inevitably, some of those decisions are going to displease people. Those people are students, or they are residents of the adjacent community, or they are trustees, or they are faculty, or alumni. In any case, one of your many stakeholders is going to be peeved, and you have to be able to deal with that, or else you'll never get anything done. But what you don't want to do is be in a position where the students and the faculty and the trustees, for example, are all dismayed at the same time, because that can be sufficient to cost you your job.
Well, another rule is every faculty needs a few crackpots.
Yes.
Do you care to name names?
Well, they know who they are. No, I think it's true. I mean, you don't go out and look for the crackpots. They find you. But the point is not to take it all too much to heart or too seriously. There's a great temptation to wring your hands and worry. And in fact, I think a good university is going to have some people who take strange and unusual positions on things, and you just have to see it as a cost of doing business. And if it's a test of academic freedom, if you hear from neighbors or you hear from trustees complaining about some faculty member, you need to defend that individual, even if you don't agree with them particularly, simply because it adds grit to the campus conversation. I once had a faculty member who was genuinely controversial and saying some things that I thought, frankly, were a little zany. And somebody wrote me a letter about them, and I wrote back and I said, look, you don't have to agree with this person. I've got 1,500 faculty at GW. Surely, in the other 1,499, you ought to be able to find somebody you like. Pay attention to that person. Ignore this person.
Well, speaking of faculty, you seem critical in your book of faculty or groups of faculty that stand in your way when you are trying to change things. Is there a fundamental opposition, if you will, between faculty and university administration?
Well, yes. I mean, one is tempted not to fall into you don't want to fall into the trap of Marxist dialectics and believing, that there's a thesis and antithesis and that every group, every proposal has counter-proposal people. But there are different roles. Administrators have one set of responsibilities on behalf of the institution, and faculty, to some extent, are more responsible for seeing to it that universities are not feathers in the wind of circumstance, that they are classical but not fashionable. That said, they can also be very short-sighted and very parochial and self-interested, and to some extent, therefore, there's going to be a tension if you're trying to get things done. But if you just sit around and don't try to get things done, they'll come get you anyhow.
What about the concept of tenure? Is that an outdated concept? I mean, that somebody gets tenure and then they're good for, the rest of their life, essentially, and don't have to be judged on a year-to-year basis on how they're doing as far as teaching, research, publication?
Yeah, you slightly overstate the protections of tenure, but I understand exactly where you're going with it. And I myself have been all over the lot on this subject, and for a long time was very critical of tenure and antagonistic to it. Now that I'm a tenured professor, I must say...
You're kind of liking the idea.
I kind of like the idea, exactly right. I'm going to say some things, though, that I think are declarations against personal self-interest. When I entered the university profession in 1968, tenure was functionally a 30-year contract. The average professor who got tenure got it at about age 33 or 35, having received their PhD and then done 6 or 7 years postdoctoral teaching and writing. And so when there was a retirement age of 65 and you got tenure at 35, it was functionally a 30-year contract. What happened was, at some point, the U.S. Congress passed a law making mandatory retirement illegal. And nobody dealt with the fact that faculty had tenure, and so functionally, by doing that, it uncapped that retirement age for professors as well as other people, and tenure became a lifetime appointment. I don't think when it was created, it was contemplated as a lifetime appointment, and it made planning and very difficult, and it also inhibits, even now, the ability of younger faculty to come up, because increasingly you have an aging faculty who do not retire. Being a professor is a great life, and
why leave it? You're making good money, and it's comfortable.
Air conditioned in the summer and heated in the winter. Elevators and.
So what do we do about it?
Well, you could do many things. You could introduce serious post-tenure review. You could say that tenure was a 30-year contract, and nobody could say, well, that was an attack on academic freedom, because it functioned perfectly well until we changed the law the last time. And I think it would, in fact, be a positive thing if we were to do that, but retain tenure, and that would be, I think, a statement that we were meeting our critics a little more than halfway. And I think it would be hard even for John Dewey, and the founder of the AAUP, among other things, if he were to return, to be critical of a change of that sort.
We were talking about crackpots before, so I want to ask you about one, and that is President Ahmadinejad of Iran.
Yes.
In September of 2007, he spoke at Columbia University. Now, he has called for the destruction of Israel. He has denied the Holocaust. Iran is supporting terrorist organizations, not to mention everything that he's doing in his own country.
Yes.
Would you have invited him to speak at your university?
No, I wouldn't have invited him. And I don't think that the president of Columbia, to be fair, invited him either. He was invited by the dean, I think, of the School of International Affairs, and it probably should have been left at that level. I think that the president made a mistake in getting involved. He could have heard his mother calling and been visiting her that day, and been off campus, and allowed that visit to be done at a lower level. Once the president got involved, we go back to where we began this conversation. The appearance that the university is providing some greater hospitality than was originally intended.
So is that what you would have done in that situation?
Yes, I think that's actually an event in which I would not have stopped the invitation already having gone out. I don't think I would have said you may not speak on campus, but I think I would have taken it to a lower level of diplomacy, as it were. Or alternatively, and I think here what we may have is a failed transaction. Or alternatively, if the president of Columbia could have negotiated with Ahmadinejad for some advance in Iranian-American relations. So, for example, if an academic who was imprisoned in Iran could have been released as part of the transaction, if he could have gotten him to say, look, on reflection, you must understand that we have domestic politics and international politics, and I am knowledgeable of world history, and I know that the Holocaust took place, and even people in high office sometimes misspeak. Perhaps I shouldn't have said that. If some concessions could have been derived, then you could make a case for hosting that visit.
I want to ask you about campus security. You've said that following the tragic shootings at Virginia Tech, that people shouldn't try to lay blame with the university president, and that you've said it's Monday morning quarterbacking, essentially to say that the university should have been shut down after the first shooting. Do you not place any blame on how the Virginia Tech administrators handled that crisis?
I think there's almost no end of preparation you can do to try to create a secure and safe campus. And no matter what it is that you've done, if some tragic event transpires, people want to throw blame at you, and if nothing happens, then you probably wasted the resources, and why do we have so many security people here and not enough teaching assistants or whatever. In the end, I think a lot of these reviews and studies are, as I say, Monday morning quarterbacking. You look back and you find mistakes that no rational person could have anticipated. Now, obviously, there are basic things you need to be doing. And so at GW, for example, immediately after 9/11, I went out and recruited a particularly outstanding person to come to GW as Assistant Vice President for Campus Security, in addition to a very talented police force. And we recruited somebody who knew the academic world, had a PhD from Fletcher School of International Law and Diplomacy, somebody who had been a Navy captain for a long time and had himself been the administrator of the Norfolk Naval Station. And he has assisted us with our security. We haven't had an event. Is it cause and effect? Who knows?
But clearly, GW being in Washington, D.C., in an urban environment.
Had reason to take extra steps, but you never know when you've taken enough extra steps. And so to some extent, it's very hard to do that.
Now, on September 11th, you were actually at a meeting at the Pentagon.
Across the street from the Pentagon, yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I served for many years on an advisory committee to the Chief of Naval Operations, and conventionally we met in the Pentagon, but they were painting and doing some work in the rooms where we usually held our meetings. And so they had us in an alternative building that the Navy leases across the road from the Pentagon. And we were in a dark room looking at getting briefed and looking at some slides when an officer came in, opened the door, turned on the light, and said, "There's been an attack on the United States," and that was on the two buildings in New York. And so they turned off the slide projector and pulled open the shades just as the plane crashed into the Pentagon.
You saw it?
We saw it across the road. Yeah, it was really quite remarkable. And then we were caught there for half the day because you couldn't get away.
And you were supposed to actually be in one of those rooms in that wing.
We conventionally met in that part of the building. Yeah, it's really a little creepy when you think back on it.
Meanwhile, GW starts hearing the news. They don't know what's going on. They think the president's, you're dead because you're in the Pentagon, so they have no idea. They can't get a hold of you.
Well, they couldn't get a hold of me, and I couldn't get a cell phone to work, and I couldn't get a landline because everybody was backed up, and my wife called the university to find out where I was, and Kitty, the receptionist in the president's office, started weeping into the phone and said, "We don't know where he is," and you can imagine that calmed my wife down. At any rate, all of that seems to have worked out well. And then I spent the better part of the following week virtually never leaving the campus. I mean, I was here, 20-hour days, trying to be physically present and be sure that people saw me and be reassuring.
Was there a question of shutting down the campus, sending the students home? I mean, were you thinking of any of that?
We had no reason to believe that there was going to be any follow-up. Obviously, if there had been even a hint that there was going to be a second blow, we would have done all of those things. And we have in the past, where there have been demonstrations and crises on campus, closed the campus and sent people home or gotten them accommodations off campus. Fortunately, that doesn't happen very often during the course of the 20 years.
Now, GW being an urban school right in the middle of town, one of the challenges of an urban school like that is that it brings you into contact and sometimes into conflict with residents living in the neighborhood.
Yes.
And you reproduce some of their letters in your book.
I do.
They hate you, and it's personal.
Well, I chose the best letters, of course. I got a lot of mail telling me I was a wonderful fellow, but that doesn't make very interesting reading. And so I picked the letters that were most hard-hitting and anti-Trachtenberg. And yes, there are a few people who are very vexed with me.
But why? What's the issue?
Because we represent change, or at least I represented change, and people like the world the way they have it. But my position is, GW, founded in 1821, moved from College Hill to Foggy Bottom in 1912. And unless they are very long-lived, the chances are that the people in Foggy Bottom all came after 1912 and therefore knew there was a university there. Well, they're sort of like people who move in next to an airport and then complain that airplanes make noise when they fly over. Sure, there's a university here. What they would say to me when I say things like that is, well, we didn't expect you to be so successful. You know, we were kind of hoping you'd stay a small, quiet, pastoral college. Well, get out. That's bizarre. That's magical thinking. That's wishing. The university had no obligation not to thrive. And so if we grew and we acquired property and we became more articulated as an institution, that was all going on even as they moved into the neighborhood. And they are the beneficiaries of so many things that the university offers. In addition to having a hospital in the event that they get sick, we have our campus security, which makes this a better neighborhood for them to live in and walk in. The students are eyes in the street, and as Jane Jacobs pointed out, this creates a safer environment for them. We have lectures that are available to the neighbors and art exhibitions, and and athletic events, and just service upon service upon service. So I find a lot of the complaining unsubstantiated, and even though I try to pay attention and where it had merit to address and redress the concerns, some of the time, some of the neighbors weren't as focused as they might have been.
One of your college professors said to you shortly after you graduated, he said this: "You know, Trachtenberg, I have a feeling about you. I predicted that in the years to come, you are going to become a felon, a congressman, or a university administrator."
Yes, yes.
What prompted him to say that about you?
Well, he once said to me that an associate dean was a mouse in training to become a rat. So professors, even back in the day, held a dim view of administrators, and he was making a comment, I think, largely on the basis of my academic work and my extracurricular activities at Columbia as an undergraduate, which were extensive, and I sat on a lot of student faculty committees, and I discovered I had a capacity for this kind of work fairly young.
But you wanted to be a university administrator.
Well, it's hard to say that. I took exams when I was a senior at Columbia, trying to determine what my skills were, and they suggested that I ought to become an executive of the YMCA.
It's kind of like that.
Yes, indeed. That's what.
Just a bigger scale.
That's right. It turns out that, of course, they if you generalized from that, as they later do, I should have been either a school administrator, a public, a city manager, a hospital administrator, a university administrator, and so it turns out that the exam was far more prescient than I would have anticipated.
You know, as president of GW University, your name carried quite a bit of weight in the DC area. I was surprised that even outside of this area, you were able to get things done with that name. Can you tell us the story about the time that you needed a plumber?
Yes, well, my family and I have been summering on Martha's Vineyard for a quarter of a century or more, and one year we were there, and it was Francine, my wife, and I, and Ben and Adam, my two sons, and their respective girlfriends, and my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, and my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and two of my nieces. So it was a big crowd in the house. And my wife informed me that the toilet wouldn't flush. So she pointed out, she said, my father is over 80, and he needs to use the facility from time to time. And so she said, I'm taking everybody into town for lunch, and I'm giving you the assignment of getting the plumbing fixed. Well, I know nothing about plumbing, and so I felt a little anxious about this. And they departed, and I discovered that the people from whom we had leased the house had a cork board on which they had mounted the business cards of tradesmen. And so I discovered there was a plumber, and I called the plumber and said, "Look, I'm the tenant in the Crookshank house, and the toilet's blocked up, and I need the plumber." And the woman said, "Well, you know," she said, "this is July 4th weekend." I said, "I didn't call for the date. I
need a plumber."
I need a plumber. And she said, "Well, he's completely booked up, and I can send him," she said, "on Monday." So I said, no, I said, my father-in-law is well into his 80s. He won't be able to hold out that long. I need somebody today. Oh, she said, that can't be done. So I'm thinking all the while, I'm going to have to fly in a plumber from Washington or something. I'm going to call the GW plumber and get him to come on his day off. And so I said, all right, I'm not going to argue with you. Take my name, and then if something opens up, call me. Meanwhile, I'll try and solve the problem otherwise. So she said, all right. I said, my name is Trachtenberg. Now, all my life, I've been spelling Trachtenberg. Nobody spontaneously knows how to spell it. So I saw T-R-A. She said, no, it's T-R-A-C-H, T-E-N-B-E-R-G. I know how to spell that name. I said, my goodness, how did you do that? Oh, she said, I have a son, and he's a student at this university in Washington, D.C.
And the president's name is
And the
Trachtenberg.
president's name is Trachtenberg. I said, really, what's your son's name? So she tells me her son's name. That was her mistake. And I said, well, listen, I said, I need to tell you, I am the Trachtenberg of your son's university. I cannot guarantee that he will graduate. Any rate, she found 15 minutes for the plumber. And he came over and he hit a snake, and he pulled a Bic pen out of the plumbing, and I don't know, the previous tenant, and my wife came back with the family, and I'm sitting there, and she says, well, what happened? I said, I got it fixed, and she said no, and so she went into the bathroom, and she pushed the plunger in. So she was astounded. She said, how did you do that? And I said, I'm saving that for my book.
Well, I'm sure she was really impressed with that. But when you and your wife were vacationing in Spain, okay, in a different country,
Yes.
her purse gets stolen.
Yes.
And she has no passport.
Right.
So she says, okay, now do something.
She did. I mean, she was so impressed with what happened on Martha's Vineyard.
She wanted to see if it would commute outside the country.
Exactly right. Yes, we were in Barcelona, and somebody came by on a Vespa, and put his hand into the car and just picked up her purse, took it out the window, and tooted away. And he took took her money and keys and credit cards and wallet, and among other things, passport. And we were due the next day to fly to Madrid, and of course they wouldn't let you on the airplane without identification. So that was a problem, and that problem was compounded by the fact that it was a Friday, and the consulate was closed. I mean, we called up, and we got a recording that said it was a fiesta. Well, fiesta for them, but not for us, and so they were closed. Well, so given the assignment to deal with that, I called Madrid and asked to speak to the ambassador. Now that's chutzpahdik, but it was informed by the fact that I knew that the ambassador's daughter was a GW student. So when the ambassador's secretary answered the phone, I said, this is President Trachtenberg of George Washington University, and I need to speak to the ambassador. Please tell him his daughter, as far as I know, is fine. Because if the president of the university calls, people immediately worry there's something wrong. Well, he got on the phone, and of course the first thing he said was, what's wrong with my daughter? Is everything all right? And I reassured him that it was not his daughter who had a problem, it was I. At any rate, as soon as he heard what the problem was, he said, go to the consulate, notwithstanding the fact that it's closed, and tell the Marine Guard I sent you, and I will call ahead. So his assistant called. There was somebody actually in the consulate. There's somebody there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when we arrived, they admitted us, and the gentleman who was there gave Francine a new passport. During the course of the conversation, which inevitably takes place under these circumstances, he said, by the way, he said, are you any relation to the Trachtenberg at George Washington University? I said, yes, I am, actually. It's me. Why do you ask? Oh, he said, I graduated from the Elliott School.
They're everywhere, aren't they?
There are GW alumni everywhere. You meet them walking down the streets in Paris and in Madrid and Moscow and Brooklyn, even.
Now, while you were president of GW, you had a very open door policy. Students, parents, anybody could come in and speak to you. You even had your home phone number listed. So people could just call you up in the evening.
They could, but they didn't, I'm pleased to say. It wasn't that I wanted calls. It was that I thought it was imperative that, given the nature of the institution, the president be accessible. And so I would say to freshman parents assembled, my telephone number is in the book. If you call 411 and you say, I want to talk to Stephen Trachtenberg in Washington, D.C., they will give you my home number. And I will tell it to you now, and I would call it out.
But why? Why did you want to do that?
I thought it gave people a sense of comfort and caring and a reassurance that they had a university president who was accessible. But then I would say, you have the number, do not use it. Do not call me. I will not be pleased unless you start, with my husband has just died or crises of that sort you need to be accessible for. But otherwise, we do business Monday through Friday, and there are deans of students and vice presidents and all sorts of staff who, in the end, can help people much more than the president can, who is basically helpless.
But did that cause you any problems, that kind of accessibility?
I don't think I had a dozen calls in 30 years. Occasionally, I would get letters at home. I have a wonderful story. I came home one day, and going through my mail, I saw a letter from somebody I didn't recognize. I opened the letter, and it was from a mother, a GW parent, explaining that her son was in Sydney, Australia, on a junior year abroad, and was having problems with the financial aid office here at GW. And it was early enough, and I looked, and there was a back address, and so I called information and got her home number and called her. Much to her surprise, she picked up the phone. I said, "Hello, Mrs. Smith." She said, "Yes." I said, "This is Stephen Trachtenberg." She said, "Who?" I said, "Stephen Trachtenberg, the president of GW." She said, "Yes." I said, "Why are you so surprised? Didn't you just write to me?" She said, "I did write to you, but I didn't expect to hear from you." I said, "Well, your son is in Sydney, Australia." She said, "Yes." I said, "Give me his address there." I said, I'll go see him about this." And she said, "You'll do what?" And I said, I'll go to Sydney and see him about this, and we'll get it straightened out. Well, what I didn't tell her was that Fran and I were leaving for Sydney the next morning to go to the Olympics.
But that's service. I mean,
I thought that was the finger of God, right? And so she did give me her address, her son's address. And when I got to Sydney, I got hold of him, and GW was hosting a party that night in Australia because Mayor Williams, the then mayor of Washington, was there, and we had gotten a bunch of GW students who were working at the Olympics, and GW alumni in Australia and various other sort. And so I invited this young man. He came to the party, and after the party, we had a drink together. You can drink a little younger in Australia than you can here, and we straightened out his financial aid problem. So, yeah, that's what I'd call service. Golly.
we'll start taking questions from the audience. If anybody has a question, just put your hand up. We'll bring you a mic.
Hi, I am Dory Ain. I actually am a graduate of GW 2005.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks. I'm a current staff member and graduate student. But my main question, this is also as an alumni, is if you could look back and change two things that you did throughout your presidency without worrying about money or time or anything like that, what do you think you would change?
I think I would have invested more of my energy and more of our resources with more surgical application. Too often, in my effort to keep a lot of people happy, I spread our resources a little too thin. And so we got things from here to here, and we probably should have gotten fewer things done and gotten them to here. And I think it is the agony of choice that leadership is expected to go through, and the resource allocation is that. But as I say, it's just a lot easier to give $2 to two people than $4 to one, and say to the other person, "Sorry, no pudding for you." I think that's a very consequential thing. And the other thing is I would have worked even harder, although it's hard for me to say whether I would have been more successful with the community. I'm pleased to say that many of the most difficult problems were solved during my last couple of years as president. And so President Knapp, I'm really gratified by this, does not have to fight through some of the issues that I had to deal with because they've actually been addressed. And that should give him an opportunity to reestablish a greater amity between the university and the neighbors.
You know, I want to ask you a bit about tuition rates that are so high now. This university, GW, has one of the highest tuition rates in the country. Is higher education becoming a class issue? If you've got the money, you can have the higher education. If you don't, and if you're not brilliant and aren't going to get the big merit scholarships, you just won't have access to higher education.
Well, no. Because remember, there are 4,400 institutions of post-secondary education in the country. All right, half of them are community colleges. So put 2,200 of them aside. That still leaves you 2,200 institutions. GW is an expensive institution. Now, we give away a great deal of scholarship money, and so we keep the student body socioeconomically mixed. There are students here who are absolutely from families with no money at all, and others who are obviously very wealthy indeed. But there's no obligation to come to GW, and while I like to think GW is special, I am not a great believer in kind of an exceptionalist view of the world. We are a very fine university, but a comparable education can be had, not identical, but comparable at Georgetown or NYU or other institutions, Boston University, and at many great state institutions where there is a subsidy by the taxpayers, which keeps the price lower than it would be at an institution like ours, where the cost and the price are more related. So there's no tragedy in going to the University of Maryland. There's no tragedy in going to the University of Virginia, and these schools are less expensive. Moreover, if one is capable of developing a plan, it is possible for somebody from a very modest background to do an associate's degree at a good community college and then transfer to a four-year institution and get a BA degree, and then go on and get credentialed very inexpensively. PhD programs are largely subsidized. So my daughter-in-law borrowed over $100,000 to go through law school. When she graduated, she got a job and has now paid it back.
There's also, though, the issue of primary and secondary education in this country.
Yes.
Which I know isn't probably your direct concern, but certainly those schools feed into the university system and the higher education system. And even in this city, in Washington, D.C., the quality of the education is so much less than neighboring suburbs.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there are terrific programs in the D.C. schools, but there is a bipolar system, and some of the schools are very, very bad indeed. Others far better. But it's not just D.C., it's Chicago and New York and so many other places, and that's why we have to be encouraged by what Mayor Fenty and Chancellor Rhee are trying to do with the D.C. public schools. If I were president of the United States and making policy for the country, I would focus much more rigorously on uplifting our elementary and secondary schools in the short term than on higher education. But I don't envy whoever's going to be elected, whether it's Obama or McCain, because I think they're facing extraordinary problems when one thinks about the cost of Iraq and Afghanistan, both social and economic. The treasure that we have invested there, and the young people's lives, and the return of these young people and the support they're going to need from the country. And if you look at the demography of the country, and you see so many new Americans who need our help, as well as aging Americans who need our help, Social Security and Medicaid. If you take a look at elementary and secondary education, higher education, if you look at the infrastructure, if you look at environment, the agenda is profound. And of course, the recent events in Wall Street and elsewhere suggest that we're going to have some very daunting times. Boston University announced today that they were freezing their budgets, and that all construction projects and hiring was being suspended for the time being until they sorted out what the effect of the excitements on Wall Street has had on their endowment. And even here at GW, I was dismayed and troubled to see that our endowment went down for the first time in memory. These are very challenging times, and there are moments when I think to myself, it's nice to be an ex-president.
Yes, sir. In the back there.
Good evening, Mr. President. My name is Chris Hart. I haven't seen you in a while, but
How's business?
business is good.
Good.
I had the fortunate opportunity as an undergraduate to work closely with the administration as a student association president. One of the most impressive things I saw with your administration was your ability to bring some of the best professionals together, and you were able to attract some very, very qualified people for Vice President of Communications, Vice President of Government, for Chief of Police. How did you bring those people together? How did you manage those people? And now that you're an higher education recruiter, what is your strategy for bringing those top quality people to your institution?
Well, I think what you want to do is you want to try and reach out and find the best people, and you want to try and recruit them, and then you want to try and work with them to make it possible for their virtues to stand out. You back them up when they're doing good, and you back them up when they make a mistake. I think criticism is done privately. Praise is distributed publicly, and then you try to give people the resources they need in order to get the job done. So the best police officer can't do it unless she can recruit officers to work with her and compensate them properly and give them the right kinds of training and shifts and the right kinds of equipment. And that's true whether you're talking about a chemistry department or a library or other functions in the institution. A lot of it has to do with raising the money and then investing it properly so that people can do their jobs. But these are particularly hard times. I think higher education is going to be facing challenges in the next decade that it has not had to face for a long time. Some of them having to do with resources, which they're going to have to compete with that whole litany of both international and domestic issues I ran through before. And I think, therefore, university management is going to be harder because it's going to call for greater courage and a greater willingness to be unpopular as an administrator as you make decisions that lead to greater efficiencies and a greater burden on everybody in the institution, creating a team that pulls together. And it's not just GW which has these challenges. I think it's going to be a national issue. And so the leadership of higher education from coast to coast is going to be uniquely tested. Moreover, presently, the great majority of university presidents are white males over the age of 60. And we're going to see a great number of retirements imminently, and the need to bring up women and persons of color, Hispanics and Asians and African Americans, as well, obviously, as people from other races and backgrounds. And I'm not sure we have been focusing sufficient energy on the training and the education of an upcoming generation of academic leadership. Two wonderful examples that come to mind immediately. You can imagine that for generations, the presidents of Georgetown University have been, not surprisingly, Jesuit priests. But the last go-round, when they did their search, they didn't find that a Jesuit priest was the best person to be their president. They went for a lay person, a Catholic, of course, but a lay person nevertheless, married with children, and they got a wonderful president. Jack DeJoy is terrific, but not ordained. Similarly, at Yeshiva University in New York, which I think is arguably the Jewish answer to Georgetown, when they looked for a president last, they looked at all the rabbis they could find, but they ended up getting a lay person, a pious person, a committed Jew, but nevertheless a lawyer by professional training, and he's turning out, by the way, to be a splendid president. So I think we're going to have to look for leadership for our educations in new groups and in new parts of the world, in commerce, in business, in the professions, in government, and we're going to have to be open to different sorts of professional training.
My name is Emily Olmsted, and I am a Stephen Joel Trachtenberg Scholar. And I kind of wanted to ask you a couple questions. You were the president of GW for as long as I've been alive, and I just wanted to know.
Not heard a guy.
I just wanted to know how you felt DC treated you, and how you see GW as a part of the city, as a part of the Washington, D.C. community, and what GW is doing to give back to the community. I know that we all came from a completely different side of DC, and now we're in GW, and I know that GW students don't really have a good idea. Many don't have a good idea of really what the city is. And I just wanted to know your feelings on it.
When I left the University of Hartford after 11 years as president, I did so with some reluctance. My wife was very happy. My children were very happy. I was very happy. My board of trustees thought I was doing a good job, and we lived in a lovely house that backed up on a golf course, and I could see where I could happily spend another 5 to 10 years as president at the University of Hartford, and I hesitated. One day I was having a cup of coffee with Tip O'Neill, who was then Speaker of the House, U.S. House of Representatives. And I said, Mr. Speaker, I wonder if you'd give me some advice. I've been proffered the opportunity to go become president of George Washington University. And I must say I'm very content here in Hartford, Connecticut, and I'm tempted to stay. And he said, don't be a fool. He said, Hartford's a wonderful place, but it's as if you were the mayor of Springfield. and we're offered the opportunity to go to the United States Congress. He said, you've got to take the job at GW. It's a far greater platform, a bigger canvas. You'll be able to do more and more interesting things. and so we came. But I must tell you, I had invested 11 years of my life in Hartford, Connecticut, and man, I could get into any restaurant without a reservation. I thought that was great stuff. Well,
but now you can get a plumber, you can get a passport.
Yes, no, it was the right thing, of course. You have to develop your career and you have to build on it, and this was a far greater opportunity in all kinds of ways. Washington was very welcoming, as these things go. I mean, everybody tests you initially, and in the beginning, they have no reason to have any trust or faith in you. But over time, I think Washington opened up in much the same way that Hartford, Connecticut did. I was privileged to be the president here, and it was a wonderful opportunity, and I got to know people all over the city. And I worked at it, of course, very diligently. The first year, for example, I went to churches and synagogues religiously. And I went to 20 black churches in the District of Columbia. And at the end of the service, the pastor would say, Church, we have with us a guest today, the new president of George Washington University, President Trachtenberg. Why don't you get up and say hello? And I'd come to the front, and I'd turn around and I'd say, thank you very much. I appreciate being here. And I want to tell you that as the new president of GW, I want to remark on the fact that GW has been in Washington since its founding in 1821, before the Civil War. But we are increasingly now going to be of Washington. We're going to be open to you and your children. And we're not going to war with Howard for the African-American population and try and get them to come all to GW. But those who GW can serve, we want to be there to do it. And people came up and talked to me afterwards, and I made friends that I've kept to this day, and I ultimately served as chairman of the D.C. Chamber of Commerce and served on the Federal City Council and on the Board of Trade, and engaged in activities throughout the city. I even tried to work with the Foggy Bottom Association, and who threw me out and shouted at me. And I've forgiven them.
You're over it?
Almost. But the point is, you give what you get, and I just worked at that all the time, and these scholarships that are now named the Trachtenberg scholarships, for which I am grateful to the Board of Trustees. I would have thought more modestly that they ought to hold off on that until at least I was sick or dead. But here I am, you know, sitting up, still taking nourishment, and there's a school named after me and scholarships named after me, and I'm a little red-faced about that. I get off the elevator on the 6th floor of this building, and there's a sign, this is the Trachtenberg School, and I feel a little self-conscious. And at the new faculty meeting, people stand up and they say, you know, my name is John Smith, and I just got my PhD at Princeton, and I'm a new assistant professor at the Trachtenberg School. And they go around like that, introducing themselves, and then they get to me, and I get up and I say, I'm Trachtenberg. You know, it's just not, I don't know. But I'm learning to live with it, I got to tell you. At any rate, I just think if you love a community and you devote yourself to working for it, and you make it your business to know all the representatives, the members of the city council, the mayor, and the people in the media, and you go to events, you go to weddings, you go to bar mitzvahs, you go to funerals. You're there when people are having joyous occasions in their lives. You're there when people are having melancholy occasions in their lives. If you're there for the city is there for you. Could have been better, could have been perfect. Who lives in a perfect world? None of us. But it was wonderful, and I was blessed to have the opportunity, and I'm glad that I'm still living in the city, walking distance from the university, and still participating in many of the events that make this such a wonderful community.
Christian Burley, class of 2004. Given the current credit crisis and everything that's going on, do you think universities and other large institutions are going to have to reconsider policies and financial practices that go to bonding and to fund large expansions?
Well, it's not my specialty, but I suspect the answer is yes. You know, we have historically put up buildings with a combination of debt and fundraising and out of operating funds, and I think it's going to be harder to get money from all of these sources. I mean, if you conventionally went to Lehman Brothers for your debt, you're going to discover you got a problem when you knock on their door and it says out of business. And so I think all institutions are going to have to reinvent the ways in which they get credit and how they conduct their affairs. And it won't be just GW; it'll be all of higher education. Indeed, it'll be all of the American economy. And these are going to be very interesting, innovative, and daunting times. Yes.
We'll take one more question if there's.
Good evening, George Rice, Multicultural Student Services Center. You know, they say the true essence of leadership, especially when it comes to higher education, and in other entities, they say that effective leadership is about coming in and leaving a place differently than you found it. If you could just talk briefly about the 19 years you spent here, if you could just rank, you don't have to put it in order, but maybe 3 accomplishments that you're probably most proud of during your tenure as president here, what would those 3 be?
Well, I'm most proud of the faculty and the students of the institution, who were, I think, terrific when I got here and only got better. I think the quality of the faculty, the quality of their teaching and their scholarship is much enhanced. We have a new generation of talent, and it speaks well for us. When we recruited in the old days, we would have to sometimes get down to the 2nd or the 3rd offer before a faculty member came to GW. Increasingly now, we make an offer, we get the first person we want. Likewise, the quality of our student body is tremendously enhanced. Stronger more competitive students, more serious about their scholarship, and their subsequent plans, professional and graduate school and professional school. So I think the people are dramatically changed. The physical plant is dramatically changed. There was a kind of Stalin-esque quality about our architecture and the appearance, the face, the optics. I think of the campus as a work of art, and I think the introduction of better architecture and artworks and open spaces, green space, statuary, has transformed the appearance, the optical effect of the campus, and that, I think, has had a transformational effect on how people perceive the institution and how they speak of the institution. And last but not least, I think it's a question of reputation. Look, we're among friends here. When I came to GW, GW was well thought of, but we were thought to be a step or two behind Georgetown, and lived to some extent in their shadow. I don't think that was justified then. It surely wouldn't be justified now, but now that's moot, because people think of GW and Georgetown as competitive. Our law schools are competitive, our medical schools are competitive, many of our PhD programs, our undergraduate programs. There's no guarantee today, if a student is admitted to Georgetown and admitted to GW, that they're going to go to Georgetown, whereas that was the way it was 20 years ago. And well, I think, only the best of our neighbors across town, but I don't think that they are perceived of as better anymore. And so I think that the sentiment of people about George Washington, and whether you're talking about people in the campus itself, alumni, or people around the country, is transformed. I mean, one hesitates to say this, but you'd be someplace, and they'd say, and exactly what do you do? And I'd say, I'm the president of George Washington University. And as the words came out of your mouth, people said, oh yes, Georgetown. I'd say, no. Well, it was largely basketball. Georgetown had this extraordinary success with basketball, and it had a halo effect on its reputation, and we had not. I mean, the year I came, we had lost 27 out of 28 basketball games, and I had the coach in. I remember I said to him, "Do we give basketball scholarships?" And he said yes, and I said, "Why can't we do as well as we're doing for free?" And so. I said to Bob Chernak at the time, listen, Bob, we got to make a decision. Either we're in Division I or we're in Division III. And I can live with either one. I'm a great believer in Division III. I'm a great believer in intercollegiate athletics, where there are no scholarships offered at all. Or if you're going to be in Division I, then you have to play by Division I rules, and you have to go out and compete at that level. And so we did, and we got a new coach, and we transformed GW intercollegiate athletics in that way, and that had, in fact, a positive effect on the reputation of the institution. But there's a classic example of taking a risk. Investing in basketball is not something that faculty senates conventionally think of as the direction they want to see you take a university. And if you say to them, look, you get better students if you have a good basketball teams, and you don't have to have lesser academics. I think well of Stanford. I think well of the University of Virginia. I think well of Duke, and I don't know of anybody who doesn't. Academically, we're talking academically. Well, they also happen to have very good sports teams, and so it's possible to actually do both of these things and do them both well. And so that's the direction I tried to take the institution. I think we succeeded.
President Trachtenberg.
Yes.
How do you want to be remembered?
Actually, I don't want to be remembered. I want to stay right here.
We'll all die eventually, just not tonight.
Well, actually, I've seen a lot of garlic jokes lately. People say to me, You know, you feed garlic to a baby, and then you can find them in the dark at night. And similarly, if you eat a lot of garlic, when the angel of death taps you on the shoulder, you turn to him and you say, "Yes." I'm stealing a lot of stuff from Woody Allen. I'm going to be found out. I hope I'll be remembered as somebody who tried his very best to build a better academic institution, serve his university, serve his city, and make sure everybody had a good time in the process. I've been fortunate in having a great time working. I just found the right line of work for me. You know, I was good in student government, and I thought, how can you make a living out of this? You know, Mr. Hart was the president of the Student Association, and he was tempted to do the same thing. So he opened a tanning salon. I didn't know anything about tanning, and so I got into university work. I just think, as somebody who just cared about his institution and tried to demonstrate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stephen Joel Trachtenberg, everybody. Big Man on Campus is in the back. There's a lot more stories in here. So get your copy and do some signing for us in the back.
Thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank
I really
you so
appreciate
much.
it.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it.